John Harbaugh was asked about the magnitude of the game, just being that, again, there's a lot on the line when it comes to in division. And he says, hey, if you want to win the division, you got to win division games. And of course, that's going to be coming up over the next 2 months. They're heavily backloaded with plenty of in-division games still to come.
All right, so Bobby, obviously one thing to win this game, as you saw last night against the Steelers, the Commanders kept going man coverage, single high safety, which was allowing Russell Wilson to hit Mike Williams for that go-ahead touchdown. Ravens, we just heard it from Rex. We just heard 50% completion percentage. The Ravens defense can handle this. If they just do the fundamentals, they can handle it. And that is big time what John Harbaugh spoke about. He said coming out of the weekend, they asked him, after you've watched tape from the Steelers, what's your takeaway? He did not hold back on what the Ravens want to get accomplished from here on out. They've already wanted it. This is the most passionate I've seen John Harbaugh on the topic to date this season.
Coverage is better in those situations. We got to play our coverages better in those situations. Deep part of the field, especially the deep middle and the intermediate middle part of the field, are the areas that have been a problem for us. Just very inconsistent back there in that sense, and we're going to be attacking that. It's probably the one major thing. If I was going to put a priority thing on it, obviously, probably everybody would agree with that. That's the number one target that we have to get better at, is that aspect of our pass coverage. So, we worked at it through the weekend, and we'll continue to work at it, and everybody's determined to get better, and we have a growth mindset to get better at everything, but and with a high sense of urgency to get better at everything. But that one area has to get better.
Harbaugh's seeing what the rest of us are seeing, Bobby. It's the deep middle and the intermediate middle. Number one priority that they want to fix.
And in terms of what's been happening in those areas, he referred to a few of these as literally below the line. That's what he referred to in a different answer related to a lot of these inefficiencies, these deficiencies, these weakness points of those areas of his defense. Listen to this.
They had 64 pass calls in the game. So that's a lot of passes to defend against good players, but you can't have those long touchdown passes. I mean, it's one thing to give up 9-yard completions, 7-yard completions on check down and low routes and go tackle them. It's another thing even to hit a sail route or an in-breaking route and tackle it, but to not tackle it or to let it get behind us, those are just things that those are below the line. Those are not okay. Not that you don't get beat every now and then. Teams get beat here and there, but it's just happening way too much with us right now.
Sarah, you got to wonder with the mini bye, right, the playing Thursday night and having an opportunity to work all weekend, as he mentioned that he and his staff did. You got to wonder if there were any moments where, and in that self-evaluation, you say to yourself, something's got to change. We have time. We have a 10-day period, and personnel-wise, something's got to change. We'll get to that on the back end in just a bit. And I'll let you take this right now, actually, on that topic when it comes to Brandon Stephens.
So I mean, he's calling it out. It's the deep middle and the intermediate middle. So, and we watched the tape. We already went over it. I mean, Marcus Williams was bad. He was bad. And he's saying it right there. It's one thing to let a 7-yard check down go, which is what they were getting. But you can live with that over letting something go over your head. And Marcus Williams bit on that type of stuff, trying to help Roquan Smith in the middle when he already had somebody covered. And then that's when Jamar Chase went down the field for 70 yards. So they asked him, will you consider personnel or responsibility changes on defense? He says, of course you consider everything. Everything's on the table always. That's not a news story, certainly not headline worthy. So later on, they're like, okay, well, how does the newly acquired cornerback Tre'Davious White fit in? You just traded for him. He said, well, we expect him to get out there and take snaps in the rotation at corner, meaning on the outside. He made it clear later that it was on the outside. That's why we traded for him. So it doesn't look like he's going to be like, okay, Tre'Davious is our new starter, nor should he with the way Tre'Davious has been playing. He's brand new, all of that. So he just sees him as a rotational guy for now. Okay, now the big question that we've all kind of been suggesting, not just our show, we've seen Jeff Zrebiec suggest it. I've seen Ken McCusick suggest it. How about moving Brandon Stephens to safety, since everybody you've put in there hasn't worked out yet, and now you've got more outside corners, and So John says no. That moving Brandon Stevens to safety, at least deep safety, that's not on the table right now. He's got a big job right now that he's trying to take care of. Underneath, we move guys around all the time. So that's not going to happen, Bobby. They're not going to move Brandon Stevens to safety. At least we're not going to see it this week.
Yeah. And he's got a lot on his plate, that's for sure. And he's having a really, really tough contract year, especially when it comes to all the coverage yards that he's allowed. No cornerback on this team right now has allowed more than number 21. And it's tough because he's coming off a campaign where he was used early and often and effectively last year for them. And, another topic of conversation that's garnered some traffic and attention online is man coverage versus zone coverage when it comes to what the Ravens have deployed defensively. And as Ryan Mink totaled up here, and I think we may have mentioned this on Friday's show, Joe Burrow carved him up in zone coverage, 68.3% completion, 27 of 37, 368 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 131.4. Now in man, even though it was a smaller sample size, there was a significant difference in the effectiveness. 31.7% completion it drops down to, 7 of 19 for 60 yards, a touchdown, and a passer rating of 63.5. Sarah Childs Walker of the Baltimore Sun, I thought, asked a compelling question about the fundamentals that they teach in-house to John Harbaugh, meaning what he and his staff teach to his players when it comes to zone coverage.
The thing is to keep the ball inside and in front at its most fundamental level. I think whether it's zone, it applies to run defense as well. You got to keep the ball in front of you. We believe in top-down principles for sure. Sometimes we're in spot zone, sometimes we're in match zone, sometimes we're in fire zone, sometimes we're in 2 deep, sometimes we're in 3 deep. All those things are different, and they have different ways of playing routes. But the bottom line is that you want to keep the ball in front of you, and you want to be able to see your threats and the ball. That's important. And maybe sometimes that's stated in terms of playing square. Now, you can't, if you're running with a route downfield or you're in press coverage, that can be zone as well. And it looks like man, it's kind of a man version of zone. You still got to be able to find the ball. And that's kind of where it starts.
Bobby, yeah, I agree with you. I think that was an excellent question by Jonas, trying to get into that basic idea.
Childs.
Oh, that was Childs who asked that.
Yeah.
My bad. Basic idea is keep them inside and then keep them in front of you. Like, that's the whole point. So why it was getting over their head is just against the Bengals is just crazy. Now, you pointed out the vast difference in success in the Bengals game. Remember, that was Bengals specific of zone versus man. That being said, Jonas Schaefer over the weekend had responded to somebody else's tweet about zone versus man and those numbers. And Jonas replied and said, for what it's worth, with similar conditions on True Media, the EPA data says they were significantly worse in man than in zone before Thursday. Mm. So if you're wondering why the heck don't they just, like, if you're wondering, well, just go to man, like that's the fix. Well, that was the fix on Thursday.
Right.
He's saying it was significantly worse in man than in zone before Thursday. He said similar success rates too. The margin is narrowed, but zone's still ahead, meaning the Ravens are still across the season. They've been better in zone than they have been in man. He said whether you exclude run plays or not, either way. So it kind of like right now, everybody's like, well, there it is. It's the easy fix. Like, just go to man. And it's like,
easy fix Thursday night.
Yeah, easy. That was the fix Thursday night. And maybe it's because you were playing zone forever. And then towards the end, you switched it up. And so it didn't give Joe Burrow and his guys time to adjust. So before we go and start screaming, well, that's the answer, maybe, but the history this season has shown that it hasn't been before.